Greetings, everyone. This is Scott Murphy from DS Murphy and Associates. I want to share with you some information today about CompFlo. CompFlo is an appraiser's database, um, pretty well exclusive here to the Atlanta area, and I'll talk about its history a little bit more in just a minute. But today's conversation is not just about CompFlo, but I want to share with you how to find comparables in general. And one of the main things when you're looking for comparables or doing analysis is to realize that there's no one database out there that's 100% reliable. Okay. CompFlo is a great database. It's got physical information in there that you can't find anywhere else, but it's still not the definitive source. There's still times when there can be errors in CompFlo data. There's times when you have what we call secondary data that I'll talk about in a minute. There's times when there just won't be data in there for your property. So then what do you do? So just understand and use good common sense. It, if you see a property that has a three-car garage, but they're calling it a fabulous ranch with a two-car garage, unless there's something very strange going on here, it's probably a three-car garage. So, and I have to continue to even argue with my appraisers who sometimes come forward and put information in that just doesn't make good common sense. So make sure you think about it, verify, call, whatever's necessary. CompFlo started in the 70s by a group of appraisers here in Atlanta because of the lack of good verifiable data. Of course, in the 70s, getting any data was very difficult. But sharing good physical information was just unheard of. And they created a peer sharing database, and they were backed by the International Organization of Appraisers, the Appraisal Institute. And I believe it was here, Houston, maybe two or three other cities that did it. And it stuck. It stayed around for many years. Back in the day, actually, it was called RedLink. That was the name that they put it under. So if you've heard of RedLink before, that's what we're talking about as well. Back about 10, 12 years ago, CoreLogic bought RedLink and basically tore it apart. It became very difficult to use. Appraisers were not contributing anymore because it was a voluntary system, and it began to fall apart. Fortunately, there was an appraiser here in Atlanta named Shane Moxley who had just sold his appraisal business and had a non-compete, was looking for something to do, and his background was computer science, and so he put together what we now know as CompFlo. He went out and collected as much of the data as possible. He was unable to get the data from RedLink, of course, because that's proprietary. So he went back to all the large appraisal firms, all the appraisers in the area, and got them to go into their archives and pull together as much data as possible. So he's able to amass hundreds of thousands of pieces of data and has built it to the point that it's about as good as RedLink was in its heyday. Um, so that's the background. Let's talk about how we would find comparables for a particular property. So let's look at this property here in Country Club to the south. Um, First thing you want to do is go out and find comparables in general, because searching for comparables in Atlanta market is a two-step process. We know that this house is not an 8,860 square foot home, even if the owner swears by it. Now, there may be some legitimacy to this by adding the finished basement to the above grade, but in order to do an accurate CMA or an accurate appraisal, we need to be able to divide those spaces out and account for them separately. So, we need to go to a variety of databases to get whatever information we possibly can. So, first of all, you would want to go to tax records. So, tax record shows that this property is 6,114 square feet, and it's on an 1890 square foot basement. It's got 1890 in the basement, and the basement is supposedly full, so we can assume that those two numbers are the same. Adding those together, you still don't quite get to the 8860 that the owner's quoting. So I'm not sure, of course, where they got that information. And interestingly enough, the 6100 is not correct either. When we go to CompFlo, we'll be able to show you that. So, but gathering all this information together and then trying to determine which is more correct, and sometimes you've got to add, subtract, and use a variety of different skills to get to the final number. So I'm going to show you how to get to CompFlo in just a minute and show you how it all works. But while we're talking about our subject property, here's the information on the subject property that's located within CompFlo. So we've got three different records that were submitted. First thing I want to point out to you is this column over here. Very important to be watchful of this when you're using CompFlo. S and P. S stands for secondary. P stands for primary. And the difference is a primary CompFlo record is one that actually was submitted by an appraiser who physically inspected this property on Featherstone Road and actually measured the house and supplied that information. A secondary piece of information is a comparable that an appraiser used in one of his reports that he submitted to CompFlo, but he didn't physically inspect the property. Here's what happened. When Shane started CompFlo, he started from ground zero. So a decision was made by him and a committee of us appraisers that let's use the comparables that are in these appraisals to start to fill out our database. And then at some point, we'll go back and purge them out. So what he did was, if I was appraising another property down the street from Featherstone and I used Featherstone as a comparable, he brought that data in as well and notated it as a secondary, not as reliable. But the thought was, hey, if an appraiser used this in his report that he signed and submitted and sent to the client, he's done a significant amount of research on it, and there should be a good level of reliability there. So, be careful with the secondary data. Sometimes it's going to reflect what's in the tax record. That means the appraiser just simply used tax record data, which is unfortunate. Remember, appraisers are not required to be a member of CompFlo. It's a voluntary system, and it costs money. So there's a lot of appraisers who are one-man show who can't afford it. So they're working out of their basements, and they're using tax records, which is completely unreliable, and I will prove that to you today. But it's unfortunate, but it still happens. So the coloring here, the green, you'll never see anything like this in your databases, but because DS Murphy, of course, is a member of CompFlo, when anyone from DS Murphy logs into CompFlo, it automatically tags anything that we have submitted, so giving us another heads up that this is a property that we actually submitted. So here's a primary that we did of the property, and here's a secondary that we used of the property, presumably before we had the primary information available to us. So that's all that color scheme means. So I'll show you more of this detail once we actually get into the CompFlo record, but I wanted to show you where we were going with our subject, because one of the first things in searching for comparables is knowing what your subject is, right? So we now actually have, we know that we have 5,363 square feet on a 3,300 square foot basement. I'm going to show you why this is an error. You can see here, we don't have a 5,300 square foot basement. It just happened. I think some numbers were transposed when the information was brought in. I think way back at the very beginning, some of the RedLink and maybe even CompFlo were sending some of these records out to third world countries to do manual input, but now everything's done automated, so there's very few errors moving forward. So if we jump back, the county says there's 6,114, we say there's 5,363. One of the biggest errors that I see in tax record data is the inclusion of decks, porches, patios, garages. Let's just look at this property, for instance, and if we took 6,100 square feet and we subtracted the garage, which is a little over 7,000 square or 700 square feet, what does that give us roughly? About 5,300 and something square feet. How about that? So sometimes the tax records aren't so far off, but you've got to dig deeper. You've got to go and look at the county's sketch and then re-add up the areas to make sure they're correct. Where the county is often in error as well is on the second floor. They don't have as good a detail drawings of the second floor. They're using a lot of generalizations, um, and they don't get as detailed as we do when we're doing a true sketch. So my point is, if you're doing a ranch in Fulton County and you pull tax records and you look at the sketch, the square footage is probably relatively close. But when you get into a very intricate two-story with open family rooms and rooms up and finish over the garage, the county really starts to get off track. So again, just knowing and understanding the quality of each database is very important. So if this is our subject, we've got a 5,300 square foot home in Country Club of the South on the golf course on about an acre. Now, be careful. A lot of people think that, well, at least this assessor can get the lot size right, can he? No, that's not even true. Probably anywhere from 15 to 20% of the lot sizes reflected in tax records are wrong. So you've got to be very careful, and I'll give you some tips. I've got an example here towards the end of our session that'll explain it very well. Um, another a feature again that I'll show you once we get into CompFlo is you're actually going to be able to see the appraiser's sketch if you've got a primary record. So here's our subject property, and here is the basement of our subject property. So we can now verify that no, we don't have 5,300 square feet. We've got 3,307 square feet, and then we can see how much is unfinished, which is 596. Subtract the two. This 596 is right here. Subtract it, and you've got about 2,600 square feet of finished space in the basement of your subject. So we've got some good data on our subject. We're very comfortable with what we've got there. Now we want to go search for some comparables. So again, like I said earlier, it's a two-step process. Go to FMLS, go to Georgia MLS, pull the comparables that you're most confident with, the ones that you think are going to be the best. Get possibly a few more than you normally would, because you're going to see once we go through the CompFlo process here, we may not be able to verify every single comparable, and we may lose some. Unfortunately, there are certain situations when I'm doing an appraisal, and if I can't verify the square footage either through CompFlo or going to the tax record and getting information that I'm comfortable with, I'm going to have to throw the sale out. And that's unfortunate because you know how few sales we have these days, and every one is important. So, if I get into a situation like that, this is where I might be calling an agent. I might call you up if you're a listing agent. Is there anywhere that the owner has a prior appraisal that we might be able to get a hold of a true sketch so that we know what the square footage is? Or if I'm using it as a closed sale, I might call the buyer's agent and say, Mr. Buyer's agent, you represented your buyer. Do you happen to have a copy of the appraisal that was done for the purchase of this property? And would you share with me either the physical data or send me the appropriate pages so that I can get that information? So, go a step further if you have to, and rely upon agents such as yourself. So if you get calls like this, understand why we're doing this. We're trying to verify a comparable that we desperately need to use, but don't have enough data to move forward with it. So what parameters do I use when I'm doing a search in the multiple listing service? Well, it depends. If I'm up on Lake Lanier, the lake is going to be a part of it, and school district is probably not going to be a part of it. But in most situations, I'm looking for subdivision. I'm looking for schools. And in some areas, it's very important to focus in on the elementary school. In some, it's important to focus in on the high school. You've got some areas like Soap Creek that are in Wheeler and Walton, and you've got to know which is which. So sometimes you want to start with the elementary, sometimes you start with the high school. The age of the property, that's important. You don't want to use anything significantly more than about 5 years either side of the subject's age, unless you're in town and you're talking about homes that were built in the 20s, 30s, 40s, something like that. You can have a broader range. If you're in a suburban area, try to stay in the same era, right? 1980s homes, you can imagine the typical Dunwoody 80s homes, right? 8 foot ceilings, relatively small rooms, smaller kitchens. 90s homes, okay, we started getting into 2 story family rooms, bigger kitchens, bigger masters. 2000s, far more elaborate master suites, and so on. 2010s, after the crash, we started going away from some of the 2 story spaces, and so on. So some of these things, you can't take a 1980s Dunwoody home and compare it to a 2012 home with 10, 11 foot ceilings and so on. You just can't make that 1980s home into that. So there's no way that it's really going to be truly comparable. Remember too that there may be 10 or 12 sales in your subject subdivision, but once we start looking at them, only a few of them will end up becoming comparable. So don't just think that you've got to stay within your subdivision because we've got 20 sales, that should be enough. Maybe not. If you've got that, ranch on a finished basement and there are no other ranches and everything else is on slabs, you got to go outside the subdivision. Those are other homes are not comparable. So don't get hung up on that. Lot size, of course, is very important. This is a huge pet peeve of mine. A lot of appraisers think that a lot is a lot is a lot. No, it's not. If you're in a typical subdivision in a suburban area and one lot is, zero point 0.3 and another lot is 0.62, assuming similar topography and view and everything else, the one that's 0.62 is a lot more valuable than the zero point 0.3 acre one, and a buyer is certainly going to pay that. Go look in any subdivision right now that's being built, and every single lot has a premium on it because every lot is different. So size does matter. Within a tenth of an acre or a quarter of an acre, possibly, you might not make adjustments. Maybe there's variances in view or topography that make up for it, right? Maybe the zero point 0.3 acre is more valuable than the zero point 0.6 acre because it's a level lot with a better view. Well, that's fine, but make sure that you're taking that all into consideration. Never ever use square footage as a search parameter. It's meaningless. And I really wish that FMLS would get on the ball with this and allow us to put in basement square footage, basement finish, above grade finish, allowing us to start to get a better, more meaningful database in FMLS. Because right now, never use square footage. It's just going to send you off on a wild goose chase. Um, and that's why we need to take the next step and go to CompFlo. So I've searched within Country Club of the South for properties that I felt were similar to my subject property. I know that we're probably in the 1.1 to 1.2 range, but I'm not having any predetermined value. I just know that it recently sold a little over $1 million a few years ago, and values are doing good. So, you're going to have a general idea where you are, but don't limit yourself too much. I started down in the 800s, and I'm going up into the 1.5 range. And what you'll do is you'll start looking at these 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 properties, and you'll say, oh my God, they're so much better. They're so much bigger, much better view. They've got a pool. We don't have a pool. And you start getting down here and you're going, okay, well, this one's actually quite similar to ours. We actually might be a little bit nicer than this one. Oh, we're definitely nicer than this one down here on Pemberton. And so you found that sweet spot, right? So you've zeroed in on it a little bit. So you've kind of determined what your property's not worth. Now let's narrow it down and determine what it is worth. So pluck out the ones that are the most similar, looking at age and, room count is something that you really can't even search by either because total room count is not a good representation. The rooms that are in the basement don't count the same as above grade. So if it was really easy to search above grade rooms, I might do it, but you've got first floor, second floor, it's too complicated. So even searching by bedrooms or bathrooms in a property like this is something I don't do. If we're in smaller ranches or something, yeah, I'm going to use bedrooms and bathrooms probably as a search parameter. We're definitely going to adjust for it. I'm just saying, as far as parameters, I don't necessarily use those in these bigger homes. Um, you can already see that there's what 24 active properties and only what seven, six, seven properties that have sold. So a significantly larger. We've probably got an oversupply in the area, but here are the properties that I would consider down here. Probably these four properties. So print these off as a PDF, print them on paper, whatever you do, make a list, whatever your next step is here. Probably the best thing I suggest is printing them off where you can actually make physical notes on them, and then move on. So now we're going to go to CompFlo, the crux of this presentation. So you all should either have access to some type of corporate login for CompFlo. We do at our Academy of Real Estate have a program where you can sign up to get your own individual login to CompFlo. It's just $10 a month. It's a pass-through cost that we do with CompFlo, to be able to offer it to individual agents. So if you're interested in that, you can call back to our office, um, and get more information about that. So however it is that you get onto CompFlo, log in, and you're going to come to a landing page like this. You will go to the member login screen, and the member login screen here, and you log in. So log in, and this brings you to this main dashboard. Really, all we're going to look at is single family. There is no multifamily data in there right now. Tax records will show you, plats I'll show you. The rest of this isn't important. So you're going to log in through single family, and then you're going to find your county. The last 8 counties that you or whoever you share the login with has used will remain up here. And you click on that county, and then you go to the street address. All you need to do is just start typing in information about your subject. You don't have to put street, lane, road. Don't get too descriptive to the point where you're either going to type it in incorrectly or someone else may have possibly typed it incorrectly. Or when you get into the situations where you have like feather wood, which is really 2 words, you know what I mean? Or north, south, all that kind of stuff. This is a database, and it will only find records based on exactly the way that you type it in. So I would just go as brief as feather and hit enter. So here we are again. This is our subject property, and it shows you that information that I showed you earlier. So let's go in and explore a little bit about CompFlo, and then we're going to come back and look to see if we can find the comparables that we just found in FMLS. So let's go into this record right here, and let me clear out my work file because that's something I want to show you. Here is the appraisal. They call it the appraisal data here. So you've got map information, legal information, subdivision, so on. You've got the age of the property, the room count. Remember, this is above grade room count. So there's 5 bedrooms, 4.5 baths above grade. We have 5,363 square feet. We already talked about the little error here with the basement, a 3,308 foot basement, of which we calculated about 2,600 square feet finished. It's a 2-story home. It's stucco. It's on 1.13 acres, built in 1992 with a 3-car garage. And then they've also captured this part of the appraisal, which gives you some more descriptive information about the property. So this was a paragraph that's in the appraisal put in by the appraiser. So up here you can go to tax record data. This shows you similar things to what you would find in the tax record. Now, very important, we are not on Fulton County's page. We are in a database that was put together by a third party. Just like when you go into tax records in Realist in FMLS, you are in Realist. Realist is a company that works around the country extracting data from various county databases and putting them into multiple listing databases. So it's very difficult to get information from all these thousands of different counties who list things all in very different ways um, to funnel back to one central structure. That in and of itself causes a lot of the errors that you see when you're looking at what you think is the tax record. Um, so pulling data back um, through this method is not necessarily the best way. What you want to do if you really want to verify tax record data is go to Fulton County Assessor's record, and pull up the actual tax record through Fulton County. And that's very easy to do. You just go to the Fulton County, FultonCountyGeorgia.gov brings you to this page, and you would click on Property Record Search, and that takes you into a search where it's going to ask you, we want to do an address search, and we're going to put in our subject property, which is 1008 Featherwood, and hit enter, and it brings up, see, it brought up a couple different feather things. Okay, so I want this one, so I'm going to click on Featherstone Road, and here we are now actually in the true Fulton County record. So as accurate as a tax record can be, this is it. So you can look at sales information, permits value. I like to go to map. Um, this is the map, but unfortunately, it is being populated by, powered by ES. I don't even know what it says down here, but it's using global satellites to give you dimensions along here. So any dimensions that you see in this type of satellite view are going to be approximate. It's only when you actually see the true dimensions written out on the plat, like you would if it were a survey, that you can rely on them. So what you can do here is you can go over to, you can search on it, you can measure it. So if you weren't sure of the size of this lot, you can go right here and hit measure. I want to find the area, and then I would click on one corner here, click down here, click down again here. You see I'm hitting it as close as I can, but I'm not 100%. But and then I click there. So you can see over here to the left now, 49,233. So we all remember our math. If you take 49,000, 49,223, 43560 divide, you get 1.13 acres, which is what the county has. So we verified it. Um, it, this is very helpful if the county were saying that there was only 0.62 acres, and you're like, no, I know it's more than an acre. So you can go back here and verify that. So again, you would just click out of this to stop all that craziness. Tax information, so you can find out what the recent tax bills were on the property. Also remember too, these you've got county tax records, you've got city taxes. Make sure that when you're listing a property or you're quoting taxes to your client, that you're not just giving them the county tax, which is 12,508. You're adding in the city tax that goes to the city of Johns Creek. I just wrote an article about this, so you'll want to go to the Georgia Real Estate Commission and look at common errors in appraisals, and I talk about city names. Which city name is it that you're supposed to be putting in your listing? Which city name is the one that's supposed to be in the appraisal? Um, so let's go back to RedLink. I diverged a little bit there, but you can look at deed transfer information. So here are the prior sales of the property. You can look at the sketch as I mentioned earlier. So here's the appraiser's sketch of the property. So you've got that information right there. You could print this out, put it on the dining room table. There's some photographs. This might be helpful. This is back when this property was appraised, um, and all relative to that. Here is another version of a plat. This is done by Google Imagery. So again, this is Google satellite saying what these dimensions are. You can look at a satellite map, it's basically the same. You can also go through flood map if you wanted to verify if your property is in a flood zone or not. You can do that by clicking on get your address, copy it onto it, click here to open up the floods. It's going to go into a new window. You accept it, and then you go in here and put in your address. You could type it out again, or I put it on my clipboard, and whoops, and then hit search, and it takes you right into the flood information, and it can take you right down to the FEMA flood map, where you could see and locate your property. It's a little easier to do this on FEMA.org. Go onto their website and search for flood maps, and it'll show you a little bit easier to read map where you'd be able to, because here you've got to kind of hunt around and find your property to see where you're located. But it's another great resource that you may not have known that you had access to. So here we are back at our CompFlo record of our subject property. What we could do is, we can add that to our work file and put it, add it to the work file. It was already in there. So now I've got this work file going. Let's go back and look for some comparables now. So here are the properties that I had outlined to you earlier when we were in the FMLS printout. And I typed them out here because I'm going to show you a little trick that we can do. Let me see if it's going to let me. Uh-oh. Let me do that. No. Okay. Let me do this. What it allows you to do is actually search all of them at the same time. So I wanted to be able to do that. And then I wanted to be able to come in here into CompFlo and put them all in. So our CompFlo is right here. And here we are back in CompFlo. So now I want to go back. I want to redefine my search. So here's my search. You can go through and put these in one by one, right? Every comparable you want. But there's another feature down here that's search multiple property addresses. So you go there, and then you just type them all out one by one. In this case, I've already typed them to save a little time here, and then I can search. So now what this is doing is it went and it searched for all those properties and has printed them all out for us. You can see that some of them are S's, some of them are P's. You're going to have to find the ones that are the most reliable. So here's one on Melbourne Hill that we saw. Here's our properties on Featherstone, our subject. Here's one on Kettering that we would be able to use. So again, you can open that up. And there's one, okay, might as well see it. You got to be careful sometimes maneuvering in here when you're going back and forth. It's hard to get jump around in here, and it caused me to lose my search there for a second. Whoops. Multiple, start search, and okay, great. There's something going on. Search. There we are. Okay. Sorry, we're back. It even happens to me, and I use this all the time. So sometimes you may have to restart your search or what have you. So here we are on Stewart Ridge. Quite a few entries for Stewart Ridge. Only one of which is a P. So let's look at it. The P is 7,199 square feet. And then we've got others that are 73, 73. I don't know what that is. 7,000, 72, 71, 72, 71, 71. That one's way off. So we've got a pretty good consensus. Of course, we're going to look at the one that is a primary record. So let's go, well, let's add that to our work file. And I want to add this Meriwether to our work file. I'm going to take this Kettering one and this Melbourne Hill one. So now I've got all those in my work file and I'm able to do what I want with, look at them, manipulate them, however. So let's go into that Stewart Ridge, and here it is. So we can see when it was put in. That's important. So the source date was just in February of 19. You'll learn who the better appraisers are. And then you can see the data that's in here. So you've got 7,199 square feet. That's above grade. So there's 13 rooms, 6 bedrooms, 6.5 baths above grade. 0.75 acres. It's on the golf course. It's a 3-car garage. Here's how the basement reads: 4,979 square feet total, 4,594 of a walkout basement. Down in the basement, we have 5 rec rooms. Sometimes we just run out of rooms. I mean, we only had one, there's 1 bedroom down there and 1.5 baths, and then basically 5 other rooms. You know, you probably got a pool room, a recreation room, a family room, a den, all kinds of other things. But the biggest important part is that there's a bedroom and 1.5 baths down there as well. Here's your legal description, and then here's your sketch. So here's a copy of the appraiser's sketch. So you can look at that, and there's your physical information there. Pictures, of course, you'd have these pictures in FMLS as well, but just gives you another reference point, plat, and so on. So going back to, we can go look at Meriwether now. So we've got Meriwether. Again, it's 5,009 square feet above grade. It's a 4-bedroom, 4 full baths, 2 half baths above grade. 3,558 in the basement, of which 1956 is finished, and so on. This one was put in back in 2013, and you can look at that sketch. So, again, very useful information, and I think you've got a good idea how to navigate all this now. So you can go into print, and then you can print whatever you want. You want to print the whole thing. You want to export this data somewhere. All available to you. So that's pretty much CompFlo in a nutshell. I just wanted you to be very careful of the primary right here, primary, secondary, and knowing how to maneuver through some of these other tabs. So okay, so verify which, okay, so here's the last example. We got about 10 more minutes and then we're going to wrap up. I'm going to show you another property that I found when I was researching this appraisal. Here's a property on Old Southwick, okay? Great property. I had 1.13 acres, so I was looking for something to bracket it. I always want to find something that has a larger lot, or really a more valuable lot. I want to find something that's larger in square footage, smaller in square footage. You want to be on both sides of every parameter for your subject property, because if your property is 5,000 square feet and every comparable you use is 6, 7, or 8,000 square feet, what have you really proven? You used a whole bunch of comparables that are much larger than your subject property to come up with a value. You always want to have some that are bigger, smaller, more bedrooms, less bedrooms, and so on. So I was looking for lots and golf course. This was going to be a perfect comp, 1.7 acres. So I, continued doing my research. I went and pulled up the real list on it. Real list said, 1.7 acres. I actually got very descriptive. I'm like, okay, well, the only problem was when I looked at it, I drove by the property first, and then I look at it here, and there's no way this is 1.7 acres. And to me, this jumps right out at me because I know these numbers. That's not even an acre. 43,000 is an acre. So this is less than an acre. Why are they saying 1.7 acres? So I called the buyer's agent. This had already closed. And I said, am I missing something? Did your buyer get another lot? I mean, this is pretty wedged in. There's not like another lot sitting over here or over here. I doubt that they expanded out into the golf course. That never would have happened. I'm just trying to understand. And the buyer's agent said, "Oh no, I mean that the lot they got is 1.7 acres. Everybody was in full agreement of that. And as a matter of fact, it was a very important part of the negotiation. And my buyer would not have paid what he paid if it was less than 1.7 acres." And she said, "Why do you ask?" I almost wanted to just hang up and say, "Never mind." But I went on to explain to her that, in doing my research for this other property, I noticed this, and it is not 1.7 acres. I said, let me do a little more research before I tell you what I really think it is, because these are satellite imagery, and I want to get the exact number. So I went on and did some more research. I pulled up a red link on the property, or a CompFlo on the property, and another appraiser had used this as a comparable. Remember, it's secondary, and he put 1.7 acres. He may have messed up his appraisal, but he was relying upon the tax assessor and the listing agent, everyone else who put in 1.7 acres, but he didn't dig as deep as I did. He didn't use what I consider common sense to see that there's no way it was 1.7. Anyways, so here is, I went to Fulton County. I pulled the plat up. I got, the more true dimensions off of the county plat, and it actually comes up to 39,000 something. But here it is. Even Fulton County is displaying 1.7 acres. So what is the true definitive source? Well, we haven't gotten to it yet. Forsyth County isn't really even the true definitive source. The true definitive source is the actual recorded survey of the property. So this is where you want to go to GSCCCA, right? And pull up the deed, pull up the actual recorded plat. And so you can go into GSCCA and go into the plat index, search for Country Club of the South, search for land lot 106 or whatever we were in, and very quickly, within a matter of minutes, I was able to find this plat, and we're actually only 38,665. So 38,665 divided by 43560 is 0.88 acres. Basically half of what everyone else was saying. So I proceeded to go back to the agent, who then went to the listing agent, and I don't know what type of lawsuit ensued after that, but you don't want to be caught up in those types of situations. So, I know you're probably feeling very helpless here, but using good common sense, thinking about it, know how big an acre is, know how big a half an acre is, and keep that in mind, when you're listing properties. Um, and I would never buy a property without getting a survey. I know they're not required, but whenever I buy properties, and I buy two or three a year, always have them surveyed. It's not just the size I'm looking for; it's encroachments and all kinds of other things. So anyways, that kind of brings us to the end here. I kind of wanted to make it a little more than a discussion about CompFlo in and of itself, because CompFlo is just one of the tools that you're using. So know and understand the limitations of each tool that you're using, combine them together to get the best possible data, to be able to do the best possible analysis, the best possible CMA. Um, if you have any other further questions, feel free to reach out to me. I am DS Murphy at dsmurphy.com. That's like David Scott, MURPHY. Or you can call our office at 678 584 5900. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.